Welcome, apprentices and acolytes, and I hear the whispers that people think George Lucas's trilogy is gonna happen. I don't think so. Let me tell you why. Ready up.
Ready up, my destiny.
Welcome, apprentices and acolytes. It's so good to see you, you know. It's Unlock the Knowledge coming around the entire galaxy, fam. And you know, when you want to hear some Star Wars talk, just come on into the Dark Temple, visited by Mara Jade, Luke Skywalker, and Kyle Katarn, and so many of the Force sensitives like yourself. I am Lord Dagovere, and fam. So, first things first. I've heard the whispers and the rumors about. It's not even really rumors because I believe it's actually in the Star Wars archives. Was it by Paul Duncan, I think his name is, and I haven't been able to purchase these. I think they're very expensive. I think they go on episode and then also trilogy, so I think it's like the original trilogy, and there's also the prequel trilogy where they have just a huge archive, essentially. These books have a plethora of knowledge that are incredible. It goes from like what the character was supposed to be, like the original intent of the scripts, and so many revisions. There's so much stuff in there, and nerds like me just literally like they were like, just think about the idea of having all that access to that knowledge, and it's out there. You can get them, and I've always wanted to get them. I'll probably obtain them over the next few years or so, the next decade. I'll probably try to get some. And one of the things I believe that was talked about is actually George Lucas's sequel trilogy about Darth Talon and Darth Maul rising to power in the end, and basically Darth Maul has a crime syndicate, and Darth Talon is basically his apprentice, and there's a lot of like really cool aspects of it, but the one thing that's always kind of stuck out to me the most is the fact that Darth Maul is dead, right? And Darth Maul could have been a massive villain or anti-hero going forward, and he basically was in Rebels, but I think the way that his ending, his ending ended and his story ended was beautiful, and I don't think it should be touched, but I also think that is also, as great as that story is, that is also the conflict that you have with very important storylines being told with animation. And you can clearly see now the difference, right? The difference of how many fans, right? The wider fan base watches live action instead of animation. And that's because, it's just the idea that cartoons are meant for kids. And we live in an age now where a lot of cartoons grow with a generation. They grow with, they grow with the children that become teenagers, and the teenagers become adults, or grown man children like myself. So yeah, I mean, it's very easy for people like myself to want to watch animation, especially animation that's like the Star Wars, the Old Republic, the Knights of the Old Republic video game and MMO stuff. Like those trailers from Blur and Star Wars The Old Republic are phenomenal, and I hope one day we get versions of that going forward, because I love what Bad Batch has done, I love what Clone Wars has done, I love the animation, I love Star Wars Visions, I love Star Wars Visions, but I would like to see another version of that, to where we can probably get to a point where both casual fans and hardcore fans come together and have a little bit more open-mindedness to watch something like that. And the reason why I'm talking about the animation is because there's so many people that have no idea that Darth Maul is dead, right? And it's funny because in The Phantom Menace, he died, but even when I watch the way that he dies in The Phantom Menace, like the dude is still moving as he's falling, so you don't necessarily see him die. And Darth Maul, I feel like, has always been a great example of how Sith and their hatred can allow them to live. And it's actually a pretty great inspiration from, or even maybe what you want to say, a tribute or an ode to Knights of the Old Republic 2 character Darth Zion, who was just literally too angry to die. That was his thing, his spiel, his innate ability that no one else had was his body was being held together by the literal dark side because he was just so damn pissed off at everybody. And that was so intriguing as a character, because how do you kill someone that just doesn't want to die? You have to talk them into dying, and that's how that character dies, and which I think is also beautiful. So please do your homework and go play Knights of the Old Republic 2. I still think it's one of the most underappreciated games of all time. I love it more than the first KOTOR because of the characters that are in that game. So please go ahead and watch that and play that. But Darth Maul, all right? And I don't think Darth Maul's coming back. I don't think Darth Maul's ever coming back. I don't think that George Lucas's sequel trilogy is happening. I don't think it can happen carbon copy verbatim. But I do see an opportunity where pieces of George Lucas's trilogy can come to reality. And you see a little bit of that now with Ahsoka. And that's something that I feel like a lot of fans, including the fans that are that have very strong opinions about the sequel trilogy, negative opinions, is because they're so fixated on the stuff that came before. And what I mean by the stuff that came before is, Heir to the Empire. What they say is the real sequel trilogy, and it's not really the real sequel trilogy, bro. It's not, but that's a conversation for another day. Anyway, it's a fantastic story. It's an amazing book series, incredible characters, man. Some of the most popular that we've ever had, and now you're seeing them now in Ahsoka, in live action. It's happening, and a version of that story, of the original story that came after the original trilogy, is now happening. And I think that it's very possible that you can get a version of that. For instance, Darth Talon and the criminal underworld, and I think when you watch The Mandalorian, there's a lot going on, especially when it comes to like bounty hunters and the bounty hunter guild and the criminal underworld. You see that there is more Hutts out there, especially like the Hutts specifically, I feel like are one of the more compelling races in Star Wars, and I really think they need movies. They need more media, because the Book of Boba Fett, that's the one thing the Book of Boba Fett, in my opinion, struggled with the most. I like Book of Boba Fett, okay? I'm sorry. I like it a lot. I love it way more than Kenobi, but I don't love it as much as, say, Andor, Ahsoka, Mandalorian Season 1 and 2, Star Wars Visions. It's kind of like mid-tier, just a little bit above mid-tier for me. I do enjoy Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett, and I feel like if they ever need to do a Book of Boba Fett 2, which I think they should, I really do, okay, because there's just so much that we missed out on in the first season. Get more into the criminal underworld, like talk about Hutt space, talk about how ancient Hutt space are, talk about how ancient the Hutts are and how long they live, how durable they are. Because the only time we've really seen Hutts is, Jabba the Hutt, and of course we got a little bit of that in Book of Boba with the twins and or the brother and sister, and I think it's hilarious how they're kind of seen as these fat, overweight, gluttonous creatures. And I would love to see different versions of them, because if you know the expanded universe, you understand how lethal and terrifying Hutts can be, especially if they're trained in combat. I mean, it's almost impossible to kill these things. So I want to see more of that. I want to see more of the Hutts, specifically in how crazy the criminal underworld can be, because it is a mafia. And you see a lot of that in Clone Wars, you understand a lot of that stuff. But there's elements of the Star Wars universe that I feel like we're not really touching base with yet, even though we've gotten so much more in the past couple years because of the media that we're getting. But there's still so much out there. We only, after how many years? What is it, 40, 50 plus years now? 40 plus years now, we finally dipped into another galaxy in Star Wars. Just one other galaxy, and one planet into that one other galaxy. So what I'm trying to say here, as I stutter over my words, is that there's so much more out there for Star Wars just than what we've seen. And when you think about George Lucas and his idea for the sequel trilogy, yes, absolutely. I would love to see a criminal underworld rise to power, or at the very least, rival and combat the New Republic, things like that. And I think that it's so possible for that to happen, especially someone like Darth Talon, a Twi'lek, right? A Twi'lek Sith Lord, and especially the type that she is. And it's so, I don't know if George Lucas just really enjoyed black and red, and because, Darth Maul is black and red, and then Darth Talon is black and red, which is very interesting to see at Twilight, because we don't really get to see so many different variants of these aliens, and I just love the idea of someone like Darth Talon being canonized into Disney canon. I wonder how they're going to even try to make a character like her, because she is extremely over-sexualized in the EU. Like, she literally just has a top and a bottom, and that's it, and then she's got a lightsaber. So, yeah, I'm very, very curious how they're gonna go forward with a character like that. But the idea of this is we're looking at Heir to the Empire. And the version of Heir to the Empire that we're getting now, is there Mara Jade? Is there a clone of Luke Skywalker? Is there Sabaoth? There's so many elements of this Heir to the Empire trilogy that we don't know if we're going to get, but we're getting a version of that. And don't even get me started on the force canceling lizards that Thrawn has, So there's versions, and there's things like that where it's very possible that we can get something like that, And you think about the Night Sisters. And everyone's always like, oh, they can resurrect. No. I don't think I've seen the Night Sisters resurrect anybody that isn't a Night Sister. I've seen them help and refragment a broken Darth Maul. I've seen them augment a living Zabrak in Savage Press. I've even seen them augment, Morgan Elsbeth and Ventress, who are both Night Sisters. So I wonder if there are limitations to how exactly their powers work, and depending on the race or the species of the conduits or the people that they're trying to amplify. And I don't see them literally snapping their fingers and bringing back Darth Maul from nothing into mist, into flesh and bone, and someone that's living. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that is anti-Star Wars. I think that Star Wars has always been has been wise when it uses the Force in witty and smart ways, and I think that is a very it's a very less creative way than what we saw in Ahsoka. I thought Ahsoka was very, very smart, the way they used the Night Troopers literally as Night Sisters and resurrected them from the dead. I thought that was the perfect way to use them. They weren't real zombies, but they were real enough to the point that they even had limits, and I love that too, because that also goes back to the Clone Wars animated series. The same exact rules applied to the Ahsoka series. The same exact rules. They died the same way. They lived the same way. They fought the same way. I thought it was perfect, man. I love that finale. I loved Ahsoka so much. There's only a few things that I think that they could have gotten better. But the choreography, which I talked about last time. But I think they're on the right path, and I think that's mainly because of Dave Filoni, man. I don't think that Star Wars is a franchise where you can just pick up any director and say, all right, yeah, go, you got this. No, I think that there's a certain type of care that needs to be taken care of. There's it's very meticulous, but more importantly, caring and understanding. And I think 90% of the people out there don't have that because they just like a certain version of Star Wars, or like a certain episode, or like one thing. And that's all. I think that's the reason why Star Wars isn't really done right with certain majority of the directors. And, Jon Favreau got it. He understood it. And then on top of that, he was helped and coached in a certain way by Dave Filoni, And I think that after so much stuff has happened, that's how you understand that. And I think when you come to all this understanding, something like reviving Darth Maul from the dead, I just feel like is improbable. That's not a way that it works. Even if you bring World Between Worlds and the Mortis Overlords and Anakin the Chosen One, you throw it all in here, I don't think that is the correct way to apply the Night Sister magic and the laws of Star Wars and how the Force works. But at the end of the day, man, Dave Filoni can come out and make it happen, and then I will sit here and just be like, okay, I don't agree with it, but yeah, we're gonna do it. All right, cool. Because that's how I felt about The Rise of Skywalker and so many other things, and that's just the way. I don't want to be completely closed-minded, but I do believe that there's certain laws that are unchangeable. and they're going to remain that way for the rest. And I think reviving people from Star Wars is just the wrong way to do it. But I do want to see the potential of what all this means, because there's another character that I think that can become a Darth Maul character, and I think it's Darth Krayt. And Darth Krayt, he's already living. He's already there. He's already there in the story. And how his old story worked, you know, we all know about Ashad Het, right? He was a Jedi, and he survived Order 66. Obi-Wan Kenobi met him. And I think that's another character that should be used, you know, that should have been used in the Kenobi series, is because the potential to plant these seeds so they can grow, and then they can become something else later. Because I think that's what also is so valuable about Star Wars, is you have the beginning and then you have the future. And the future is not ending for Star Wars. It's gonna keep going. There's always gonna be unlimited stories going forward. There is no reboots whatsoever, and that's why I love this franchise, because it's beautiful like that. And when you have someone like Darth Krayt, you start him there from the prequel trilogy, and then he continuously lives on, because guess what? He's living during the original trilogy. He's training with his master in hopes to become more powerful and defeat Palpatine and Darth Vader. And I think when he essentially gets out of his training and then he realizes that some guy named Luke Skywalker destroyed Darth Vader and Palpatine, I think that makes him sit there, and he's just in meditation, doing whatever, plotting for the next stuff. And then you know what happens? Thrawn. And then when the realization of Thrawn, then we have Abeloth. And then you have Abeloth in that story and Thrawn that lead all the way back to the seeds of Ahsoka and Peridea. Because now you're introducing the Mortis gods. And so that's where I feel like so much of that potential story starts to begin. What is Baylan seeking? Is it a portal to Mortis that so many people think? I don't know if portals really exist in Star Wars outside the world between worlds, but I do believe that something is waiting for Baylan, and I'm gonna die on this hill until it's not gonna happen, and I believe that it's imprisoned Abeloth. And if Abeloth is there in the story, well then guess what? Abeloth is gonna be too strong. Not just Luke Skywalker and Leia and Ahsoka and Sabine now, and Grogu and all these characters like Jason Syndulla, who's probably going to turn to the dark side, who I think is going to be the next Darth Caedus, and that's another story. Because then you have someone like Darth Krayt that enters, and then maybe Jason Syndulla is kidnapped by Abeloth and tortured, which slowly starts him to change his perspective on not just the Force, but also life. He doesn't have a father figure, so he starts to struggle, just like Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker. And then, of course, you have enter Darth Krayt, who helps Luke Skywalker and the rest of the Force sensitives. And then maybe potentially Darth Krayt slowly starts to, in his own way, influence Jason Syndulla to turn to the dark side and become his apprentice. I think there are so many different ways to tell this story in so many different fashions. And the best thing about it is Star Wars can take its time. There is no timeline, right? In terms of like when the deadline is due, right? When the assignment is due. You can sit here and write these stories for so long. You can make as many characters as you want relevant, because not only do you have a clean slate, even the sequel trilogy, you can sit here and tell me like, no, this happens because, no, it doesn't need to, nothing needs to happen a certain way just because this movie says. You are seeing one angle of one story. Yes, in The Rise of Skywalker, all the people of all over the galaxy come, but it's just one galaxy. It's one side of the galaxy. There are so many other things happening. There are so many other characters being, having choices being made. There's stories going out and fleshing out. I think this is a fantastic time to just keep writing, because that should not be your end goal. It's just one movie like The Rise of Skywalker. It should be further beyond, like the Dawn of the Jedi movies that are, I'm assuming, are going to attach to the new Rey movie. So just keep writing, and that's why you're always introducing characters. And I think that was one of the strongest points about the expanded universe, is you had characters, introduce them, characters from the Old Republic, characters from the New Republic, characters from the original trilogy, characters from the prequel trilogy. And that's why I think so many people love the expanded universe, is because they found some way to connect all of these dots. For instance, the rule of two, right? You have the first Sith. From there, you have the 100-year darkness because of the war that happened with the Jedi and the Dark Jedi, right? And then, of course, finally you have them being abolished and then sent, and then Korriban, and then you find the Sith race, and everything goes on from there. And then you Tulak Horde, oh man, dude, Naga Sadow, Marco Ragnos, all these characters into Revan, and from Revan you have Bane, and then Bane, so on and forth, until you finally get to Palpatine, and then all the Sith are essentially the pillars of the entire Star Wars galaxy. And I think even when the Sith are no longer relevant, there still should be Sith hiding and plotting and scheming, because that's what they're going to do. And even when they're not face first in front of you telling the story, just like the High Republic, they are out there. And there are also Dark Jedi, Fallen Jedi, False Jedi, Bogan Jedi, and I love the idea of that. And I think no matter what, in every corner of the galaxy, you can find a Force sensitive that has been around somewhere and started doing terrible things and wreaking havoc on the galaxy. Because that is that's a pretty big staple of Star Wars. And just because there is no Skywalker around, or is around or wouldn't be around, I just feel like there's some way, in some fashion, you can make a character relevant because of what happened in this previous movies. Because that's what I really believe, is that future Star Wars makes past Star Wars better. So, can Darth Maul, I know this was like a huge rant, but can Darth Maul be resurrected from the dead? No, I don't think so. But even if he isn't, you can still get so many versions of the story, like George Lucas' Sequel Trilogy and Heir to the Empire, and I can't wait to see what's gonna happen in the future, because man, I am so damn excited, and it just seems like everything is possible right now with these stories, man. And no matter what happens, no matter what character is alive, no matter what character dies, your boy Lord Dagovere is going to talk about it, and there's only gonna be one place you listen. Inside the Dark Temple, visited by Mara Jade, Luke Skywalker, and Kyle Katarn, and so many of the Force sensitives like yourself. I am Lord Dagovere, and you just unlocked the knowledge. I'll see you around, fam. Deuces.